Hey there! Before we start the podcast, I need you to put down that wavebird and listen up.
I need money.
For a tenth of what the price of that wireless GameCube controller costs,
That should be like $5 if you got it off ShopGoodwills.
you can support me here at the podcast of Two Consoles Too Late.
I need to buy more games.
Your support gets bonus content like additional episodes, Discord server access, typewriter manifestos, and personal shoutouts on the airwaves.
I actually have a typewriter.
So I've decided to make the Patreon free, so all those bonus podcasts and typewriter manifestos, you can have them for free. But if you do support this podcast monetarily, I still will send you a signed postcard, a signed trading card, a Miracle of Save States magnet, and a shout out on the airwaves. Anyway, let's get back to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the Two Consoles Too Late podcast. I'm the host, Jackson Keebler, and I am Two Consoles Too Late. Now, what does that mean? This podcast, we look at the classics and the not-so-classics of retro gaming, often for the very first time and with no built-in nostalgia. And today we're looking at a game that is in the latter category. We're looking at Silver, an action RPG for the Sega Dreamcast. And also, we're going to be introducing a new segment to the podcast called Going Long. And we're also going to have Auction Alert. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go.
Going long. It is going long. Looking long. Going long. It is going long. Looking long.
All right, so there's the new intro for the new segment on the podcast called Going Long. Now, what is that all about? I am in the process of acquiring the entire Sony PS1 long box library. And on the last couple episodes, I've talked about my acquisitions and whatnot. And I decided, you know what, this is getting tedious, but I do want to talk about, the games and whatnot. So I decided to do a bonus podcast over at the Patreon at patreon.com/2consoles2late of my experience with the long box collection. And I'm going to start streaming the long box games on Saturday mornings, probably around 7 or 8 o'clock. I'm probably going to do that to YouTube and not to Twitch. I'm still kind of on the fence about that. But I've already done an episode of Going Long. It's over at the Patreon. Be sure to check it out. This week I acquired Wipeout with a slipcover. The condition was okay, but I think the quote unquote the slipcover was sort of the selling point. Wasn't super expensive. And I think the first game I'm going to stream is probably either going to be Wipeout or Ridge Racer. These are all things that aren't quite set in stone, but are in the process. So anyway, I'm just going to have a segment here on Two Consoles Too Late where I just say, hey, this is what I got. You want to hear about it? Go on over to the Patreon and check that out. So, that all being said, let's move on to Silver for the Sega Dreamcast. The Sega Dreamcast, 25 plus years later, is an underdog, was an underdog, and is the definition of Two Consoles Too Late. And it is now, with my third game for the Dreamcast, I'm realizing why the Dreamcast was dead on arrival. If you go back to episode 136, I talked about Draconis Cult of the Worm. I was looking for a Zelda-like game, and my hopes and expectations for that game fell very short. And recently I played Shadow Man, a game that was exclusive. Well, it wasn't exclusive for the Dreamcast because it was also on the N64. But that game has since gone on and been remastered. And I think the way to play that game was to play the remaster. So Silver for the Dreamcast is just strike 3 for me with the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast, I think, is just known for what it did best: Sonic Adventure, Shenmue, Power Stone, and numerous sports titles. But I decided to give the Dreamcast one more try, and I did it with Silver, and unfortunately, it didn't go all too well. All right, so I'm just going to read straight from the manual what the story of Silver is and then add a few caveats. This podcast is going to read like a bad Reddit post because creating content on this game is quite difficult. All right, here we go. I am the chronicler. My duty is to record deeds, both good and evil, in this world and others. Before this tale begins, I will set the scene, for this is the way of all good storytellers. The world of Jara is best envisaged as a wheel with Tranquil Haven as its hub and the other isles radiating around it, some linked by grand bridges. In this great land, darkness holds sway in the form of an evil sorcerer named Silver. From his palace on the Blood Isle of Medellon, he rules with an unmatched zeal for ruthlessness and depravity over the 8 islands. His lust for power, not content with a whole world to toy with, drives him to the most terrible of demonic pacts. At Silver's right hand stands his murderous son, Fugue. It is through this fearsome warrior that Silver's will is carried out. The people of the Isles fear the mere mention of his name. To his left stands Glass, his witch daughter. Her terrible spells have twisted her realm into the icy domain of winter. Far from Silver's court, beyond the great library of Gno, stands the expansive forest of Verdante. It is a peaceful place, largely untouched by its evil ruler. Here lives a young man, David, with his wife, Jennifer. David was raised by his grandfather, a battle-scarred veteran, both wise and honorable. The old man shows great patience with David's youthful attitude, but since the death of his own son, David's father, he has known that the time will come when David must fight for all he holds dear. The name of the game is Silver. I think I've firmly established that. But it's a bad name. And the reason is this. Now, it's not uncommon for a game to be named after the antagonist. The most notable is Metroid. Another one that comes to mind is Metal Gear. I'm sure, you could think of others. But to do a search when researching the game Silver for the Dreamcast, to go into Google and say Silver video game, 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to come up with Pokemon Silver. And I don't think that was on the minds of the developers when they named the game. So it was difficult trying to piece out pieces of content for the game Silver and not come up with Pokemon Silver. And then that got me thinking, okay, what if other games took the name of the villain? So I was thinking of course, most notably Zelda. What if they just named The Legend of Zelda Ganon or Ganondorf? I mean, would the franchise have been as successful? Probably not, but The Legend of Zelda was a good game. So your adventure begins and you play as David. And there's a tutorial with good old Grandpa, and Grandpa shows you basic combat. And for about the first half hour, depending on your gameplay, Grandpa accompanies you on your adventure. Spoiler alert, Fugue kills Grandpa. Because if you know anything about Joseph Campbell, the quest giver always dies. Obi-Wan Kenobi dies. So I just knew the minute Grandpa was on the screen and started helping you along, I was like, yep, Grandpa's dead. Look at Zelda Link to the Past. Uncle, dead. So good old Grandpa didn't make it. But there is a point very early on in the game, after Fugue kills Grandpa, that Fugue is just standing there like, come and get me. And you can go off and face off against Fugue with absolutely no magic, a shitty sword, and a shitty shield. And I tried. I was like, oh, I can do this, right? No. You are killed immediately. And despite anyone's best efforts on the interwebs or on Steam or what have you, few cannot be killed in that early encounter. He just kills you right away. So R.I.P. Grandpa. Now, the game Silver is an action RPG, and combat happens in real time. So after Grandpa bites it, you can add other members to your party. But unlike games like Chrono Trigger, your party is absolutely fucking useless. And the members of your party do little to change the outcome of the combat against bosses and what have you. But your companions include Sakun, a female fighter from the rebel camp. She is skilled in long-range weapons. Vivian, a female fighter that David knew for a long time. Jug, a barbarian-like warrior. Kagan, one of the monks who is skilled in martial arts and magic. And Chiaro, a wizard apprentice. So once again, Silver is a quote-unquote RPG. It's an action RPG. But it is not an RPG. It has RPG elements, but it is not an RPG, I guess, in the traditional sense. Now, you do have this party of 3 characters, and you can change out the characters, but it didn't really change the outcome of anything in the game because more often than not, your party usually just dies. And to get them to engage in a battle was difficult. And you could switch out. You could fight as different characters, not play as just David. For my gameplay, I had David, Jug, and Kagan. And that was it. I didn't use Sakun, I didn't use Vivian, and I didn't use Chiaro. I would switch out and play as Jug because Jug would do a shit ton of damage. But for the most part, your party is pretty much just kind of along for the ride. So as you progress through the game of Silver, you go to the 8 different islands and try to collect the magical orbs that represent different elements. The 8 orbs are fire, ice, health, earth, acid, lightning, time, and light. Those are your 8 magical orbs. The ones that I used most of all, of course, was health and then fire. But depending on the mini-boss, elemental attacks, like if you're going against like an ice dragon, you had to use fire, blah, blah, blah. Not another uncommon thing in RPGs. So you go to the different islands of Jara to find these orbs. And the different islands, as you progress in the game, you can the nice thing about the wheel-based hub or what have you of Jara is that you can fast travel. And I forget at which point you're able to fast travel. You can't do it right away. It's like halfway through the game you can start fast traveling. Because I can't imagine having to go from screen to screen to screen. Because the graphics of Silver was pre-rendered backgrounds. Beautiful, beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds. And your characters traversed these pre-rendered backgrounds and did real-time combat. But that's where it got frustrating. Because you didn't once you entered into a melee with, guards or what have you, you didn't go to a separate screen and then do turn-based combat. It was just real-time combat, and it was just hack and slash. For me, what does that mean? Button mashing. So anytime I entered into any sort of combat situation, I just started swinging swords, and then every once in a while, maybe use like a special attack. The weapon progression of Silver, your weapons get better and better. With each island that you go to, you get a better weapon and a better shield, and you level up with each mini-boss. So there was no grinding. There was one part in Silver where I had to grind. And it's a part in the game where you have to go to the docks and you talk to the ship captain. And you say, hey, I need a boat to go over to, I don't think it was Metalon. It was Spires or something like that. And the ship's captain's like, yeah, sure, I can do it for like 300 gold. And you do have a monetary system in silver, and it is in the form of gold. But unfortunately, I had spent all my gold on magic potions and health potions, so I was a little short on the fare to get to the island of Spires. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just go back and defeat some enemies who drop some gold. Well, that just doesn't happen. The enemies of silver do not regen. So I had to go. It took me like 2 hours of just fast traveling all around the world of Jara. And there's this one part where these little imps come out and they're easily defeated, and each little imp dropped something like 5 gold. So for about 20 minutes, I just sat there and killed imps trying to get enough gold so I could pay the ship captain. That's the only place where you grind, right? Leveling up simply happened after you finished an island and killed the mini boss. So once again, it's an RPG, but it's not an RPG. So in my gameplay, I was able to obtain all 8 orbs that allowed you access to Medallon and eventually Silver's Palace. But once I got all 8 orbs, I briefly played towards the end, and I faced off against a mini boss, and I was just done. And I was done with a game that called itself an RPG that wasn't an RPG. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is more of an RPG than Silver. Your melee combat, as you attack enemies, you would inflict hit points depending on the attack, and you could perform quote-unquote critical hits, and that was made evident by the fact that the hit points were surrounded by some sort of like action balloon. There were special attacks. None of it mattered. I was just simply hacking and slashing, button mashing my way through the enemies. It's not a difficult game. And I get where they went with, okay, we're not going to do turn-based combat. We're going to do real-time action combat, but it became difficult on these 3D rendered backgrounds because the size of your sprite, depending on the whatever 3D background you were on, the size of your sprite changed drastically. And it became very difficult to sort of navigate. And I was thinking while I was playing the game, like, all right, I had my Dreamcast hooked up to my crappy little 13-inch Toshiba. And I was thinking, you know what? Even if I had this game on a 26-inch Sony Trinitron, it still wouldn't help at all. I mean, the 3D rendered backgrounds were, I would say, very nice. They were beautiful. But what detracted from those backgrounds was the fact that your sprite changed size, and the whole thing just started rubbing me the wrong way. All right, so the track we just heard was called The Great Library, one of the tracks on the soundtrack of Silver. The soundtrack is very good, but the soundtrack is not very memorable. And I think that's indicative of the game itself. Silver is not a memorable game. Silver only sold 40,000 copies, and that's according to DreamcastTalk.com. It received somewhat favorable reviews. It got 7.9 out of 10 from IGN, and I used IGN's walkthrough for much of my gameplay. But for once, I found myself playing a game that was an action RPG, and I just thought, this should just be a full-on RPG. But they got lazy. And had the game been a full-on RPG, had it been that you had these beautiful 3D rendered backgrounds and then entered into a combat situation where you would go to a different screen in a traditional RPG setting where you have your party on one side and the combatants on the other, depending on how you develop the game, that would have been way better. But they didn't. Instead, they decided to go for this real-time combat on the 3D rendered backgrounds with sprites that were very hard to differentiate what was what, who was who. And the game just suffered. And it suffered in so many places. The side quests. There could have been huge potential for side quests. There was only 2 side quests in the game, and the things that you got from those side quests didn't really, once again, it didn't affect the outcome of the game. The NPCs of the game, there's not many, and the ones that are in the game don't really give you clues or develop the story of the game. Once again, whole wasted potential of this game. So one of the problems I have here at Two Consoles Too Late is trying to convey my experience of a video game and differentiate this content from most of what's on the interwebs. Because once again, I'm Two Consoles Too Late and I'm late to these things. So my experience is very limited. But I don't think I'm the only one out there thinking, man, Silver could have been a good game had it been different. I think Silver could have launched a franchise. I really do. Had just little things been different. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the way I see it. Maybe you see it differently. If so, you know what? Drop me a comment. But copies, once again, of Silver, not uncommon. Price Chardon has this game around $40. I got my copy from the ShopGoodwills of, I think it was Southern New England. All said and done, I paid $50. For me, I consider that an investment in a video game. Once again, I'm a cheap fucking bastard. But I dropped $50 on this game, and I kind of want my $50 back. So I'm probably going to take my copy of Silver and put it on the interwebs. And episode 148, it's not a great one because, unfortunately, the game's not that great. Huge amount of potential. Huge, and just misses the mark entirely. And I don't want that to, I guess, reflect my experience with the Sega Dreamcast because, once again, I've only, up to this point, played 3 games on the Sega Dreamcast, and they all haven't been bangers, as it were. But once again, I root for the underdog, and that's me. All right, so over on Auction Alert, let's take a look at what's going on for the Sega Dreamcast.
Auction.
Alert.
All right, so over on the ShopGoodwills, there's a lot to look at when it comes to the Sega Dreamcast. And I'm just, in no particular order, just going to talk about a few of the listings for the Sega Dreamcast. The first one is a Sega Dreamcast Visual Memory Unit, the VMU, untested. It is black and it is going off right now at $13 with 3 bids, 1 day left on the auction. Now, the reason I'm looking at that is because I started playing Rainbow Six on my Dreamcast, and I got an error message saying that the game couldn't save because it was my memory card was not compatible. So if I have to pick up a VMU, I'm just going to go and pick one up at my retro video game store. But you can get your VMUs on the ShopGoodwill. Now, the next listing is a vintage Sega Dreamcast console with accessories and games untested. Now, all right, 25 years. Okay, we'll allow the title of vintage. I mean, because the word vintage gets applied to the PlayStation, so why not the Dreamcast? But this listing is, once again, it's only 4 pictures, and the first picture is a hodgepodge of wires. And the accessories include the fishing rod controller, and it looks like a light gun. But there's just wires all over the place, and my fucking OCD is just going off when I see listings like this. They only took 4 pictures, and there's a big stack of games, and it looks maybe like there are a lot of sports titles. I don't know, because they didn't take a picture of the fucking games. And that's coming from the Goodwill of Central and Southern Indiana. Come on, Hoosiers, get your shit together, all right? But that all being said, that's going for $162 with 3 days left on the auction and 11 bids. And one more listing is the case and manual for Grandia 2. I don't know the game, so I can't speak to the game, but Grandia 2, the case and manual is going for $10.99, but there's no bids on the auction. And I thought, is this like a valuable game? So I went over to the price chart-ins to see what they had the case and manual for. And all combined, it is $14.85 for the case and $16.51 for the manual. So that brings it to $40. No. Ooh, Jackson, come on. $30. And the CIB price for Grandia 2 is $44. So I thought that was kind of astounding. But once again, there's absolutely no bids on the case and manual for Grandia 2. And when I'm talking about the Sega Dreamcast, there are the bangers. And bangers for the Dreamcast, I would consider things like Sonic Adventure, Crazy Taxi, Shenmue, and another one that I guess could be in the conversation is Soul Calibur. And Soul Calibur for the Dreamcast, there is a copy available. It's at $14.99, and there's only one bid with 5 days left on the auction. So there's lots of options on the Shop Goodwills for the Sega Dreamcast. Some Goodwills are better than others, as we've seen, thanks to the Goodwill of Central and Southern Indiana. Come on, guys. All right, so before I close out the podcast, I wanted to do a Stick It, which is somewhat ancillary to the upcoming Portland Retro Gaming Expo. Gaming Expo I've wanted to get to for some time, just wasn't happening this year. And if you are going to be in attendance, please be safe on those war-ravaged streets of Portland. I mean, you can just hear the bullets whizzing by in that war-ravaged city, according to our fucking asshole of a president. I don't like getting political here on the podcast, but I'm pretty sure he has dementia at this point. So to Trumpo, I just got to say, stick it! Because from what I can tell, Portland is not war-ravaged. Places that are war-ravaged, places like Ukraine, places like Gaza, yeah, those places are war-ravaged, not Portland, Oregon, you fucking idiot. Shaking my head. But that all being said, thank you for listening to the podcast. I've been the host, Jackson Keebler. You can check me out on the interwebs. Just go to Google and type in 2 consoles too late, and there I will be. And if you go over to the Patreon and support this podcast, you can get all the goodies, including the Miracle of Save States magnet at the $5 level. And stay tuned for the Going Long bonus podcast. One episode is up now. I guess I'll do an episode after I do the live stream on Saturdays. The live stream is going to happen Saturday morning, so wake up and get yourself a cup of coffee and watch me play PS1 long box games. It's going to be a hoot. But as always, have a good one. I love you. Be kind to each other, and goodbye.